or you still are convinced I'm the person that killed your father, your son, and your brother. But I am innocent. The incidents that happened that night was not my fault. I did not have a gun that night. I did not shoot your family member.
It's no secret American society has a strange, almost obsessive fascination with serial killers and those convicted of the ultimate crime, murder. As much as we claim to be horrified, we can't help but look. The moment a brutal crime is committed, the killer's name floods headlines, dominates search engines, and it beds itself into our collective memory, almost instantly. But why? Maybe it's the morbid curiosity. Maybe we just want to understand. What kind of person does this? What drives someone to kill? And when it's over, after the trial, the sentence, the appeals, our attention shifts to the end, their end. We wait almost hungrily for their final words on death row. What will they say? Will it be regret, anger, peace, or defiance? We hang on to their last breath as if it might reveal something deeper, something final. In Georgia, as in many other states, inmates facing execution are given a chance to speak before the sentence is carried out. Some quote scripture, others mumble apologies or hurl obscenities. A few remain silent, and in those moments, those last words, we get a raw, unfiltered glimpse into their mind at the edge of their life. Are they meant to comfort loved ones left behind, or are they more for us, the observers, the public, the curious? Maybe we want closure. Maybe we want proof that monsters feel guilt. Or maybe we just want to feel something at all. And that's what this episode is all about. We'll explore the final statements of death row inmates right here in Georgia and dig into our culture's obsession with them. Because maybe, in those last words, we're not just hearing from the condemned. Maybe we're confronting something about ourselves. And as they face death, stripped of everything but their voice, perhaps their final words aren't for the victims, the witnesses, their families, or even the justice system at all. Maybe they're a last attempt to be understood or forgiven or just remembered. And maybe that's what the final meal is too, a last ritual that forces us just for a moment to see the humanity in those we've already judged. So I'll ask you, if you knew the time and place of your death, what would your final words be? Because one thing is certain, when your fate is sealed, there's no turning back. The gavel has fallen. I'm Nichole Mondshein, and this is Final Judgment, a deep dive into the final days, last choices, and chilling moments before execution on Georgia's death row. Some convictions unravel while some sentences are overturned. The evidence has been laid bare, the jury has spoken. But was justice truly served? For some, there's no appeal, no second chances, just the final judgment. But for others, the final judgment isn't so final after all. This ritual of final statements is not new and actually has deep historical roots. This tradition of allowing condemned prisoners to speak their final words predates the US Constitution itself, actually going back to public hangings in medieval England. Since at least the 14th century in England, crowds would gather by the thousands to witness executions and to hear the condemned's last and final words. Colonial America brought that practice with it, and over time, public executions ended, but the tradition of allowing the condemned to speak continued to endure. In many cases, thousands of onlookers stood silently as the condemned offered final statements, words that were sometimes defiant, sometimes remorseful, and often haunting.
I'm Batman.
Colonial America inherited this tradition from England, and though the method of execution has changed over time, from hanging to the electric chair to now lethal injection, this ritual of last words has continued to endure. Even today in Georgia and across the US, prisoners on death row are granted one final opportunity to speak before their sentence is carried out. Historically, these statements serve several purposes. Some believed they help maintain order, allowing the condemned to speak freely, reduce the chances of them shouting out in panic or protest. But others saw more so a religious purpose behind it, a final chance to confess, repent, or seek forgiveness before facing divine judgment. However, in modern times, the practice remains deeply human and deeply revealing. Some inmates expressed love for their families, others asked for forgiveness from victims, God, or both. And then there are those who remain silent or issue chilling, cryptic, or bitter remarks with their final breath. Occasionally, the last words become more famous than the crimes themselves. Take George Burroughs, for example, executed during the Salem witch trials back in 1692. As he climbed the ladder to the gallows, he stunned the crowd by reciting the Lord's Prayer almost flawlessly, something that was believed to be impossible for a witch, even though that's exactly what he was accused of: witchcraft. His calm and perfect delivery moved many to tears, casting serious doubt over his guilt. But Reverend Cotton Mather, a key figure in the trials, insisted the devil was merely using George's voice to deceive them. And centuries later, this moment is still remembered, not as justice, but as a chilling reminder of how final words can outlive even the harshest of judgments. Then there are more recent examples, infamous and unsettling, like Eileen Wuornos, who was convicted of murdering 7 men along Florida highways and was the first female serial killer profiled by the FBI. She used her final words to reveal her fractured mental state. Just before her execution in 2002, she said this: "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back, I'll be back." However, others go quietly. Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, simply said, "I'd like to give my love to my family and friends." In one of his final interviews before his execution in 1989, Ted Bundy appeared to accept his fate. Facing the gravity of his crimes, he acknowledged that he deserved the death penalty.
I deserve certainly the most extreme punishment society has, and I think society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me, that's for sure. Each time I'd harm someone, each time I'd kill someone, there'd be an enormous amount, especially at first, enormous amount of horror, guilt, remorse afterwards.
And his admission was one of rare clarity, marking a shift from years of denial and manipulation. It was a moment where, for once, he stopped trying to control the narrative and seemed to accept the end that awaited him. And then there are others who choose mockery. John Wayne Gacy, who murdered at least 33 young men and boys, looked at his executioners and simply said, "Kiss my ass." These final words linger, but not because they bring justice, but because they reveal something raw. They can show guilt, insanity, remorse, denial, or again, like John, defiance. But more than anything, they kind of remind us that even the most monstrous among us are still capable of speaking, thinking, and feeling right up until the end. Every state handles executions a little differently, and that also includes how they manage an inmate's final words. Some allow just a few minutes, while others offer a microphone and basically free rein. But the question remains, who are these words really for? In Texas, for example, the warden offers the condemned a microphone to speak directly to the witnesses. A staff member from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice listens remotely and then transcribes the statement, cleaning it up of any profanity before uploading it to the state's official death row information website, which is open to the public. At one time, Texas allowed both spoken and written statements, but that changed in 2019 after inmate John King remained silent during his execution, but had submitted a written statement, which was deemed controversial. Capital punishment, them without the capital, gets the punishment. State Senator John Whitmer found this message too flippant and ordered the prison system to stop publishing written statements altogether and to ban officials from reading them to the press and the public. Other states impose time limits or only allow written final words. In some cases, those words are pre-approved or even censored. In 1999, the ACLU of Ohio sued the state after officials told inmates they had to write down their final statements so that an official could read them later and censor anything that they deemed was too inappropriate. This lawsuit ended with a settlement allowing inmates to speak for themselves. But in 2010, after one man recited prayers for about 17 minutes on the gurney, the state created a brand new rule. Officials could now cut off statements if they felt they were too long or offensive. In Georgia, condemned inmates are given 2 chances to speak. First, a few hours before their execution, the condemned can record a statement from their holding cell. Then, just moments before death, they're allowed to make a final spoken statement while in the execution chamber, which is heard by gathered witnesses, their friends and family, and also recorded by the Georgia Department of Corrections. Unlike many other states, Georgia doesn't impose strict content restrictions, but the final statement in the chamber is limited to about 2 minutes. The earlier recorded statement, however, offers a longer window and often gives inmates a chance to speak more freely. Georgia is also unusual in that it makes audio recordings of final statements in the chamber, something most states don't do or even release. These recordings remain archived, capturing the last words of the condemned in real time. As a public record, these tapes are available to anyone. And in Georgia, all the state's male executions are handled at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, whereas female death row inmates are housed at the Arundel State Prison. These final moments, recorded, spoken, and sometimes forgotten, offer rare insight into the minds of those facing their death. In Georgia, these last words are often the only unfiltered glimpse we get into who they were at the very end of their life. For the public, it's more than just curiosity. It's a window into the condemned psyche in their final seconds, their final moments. A haunting moment of clarity or confusion that forces us to confront our own morality. What would we say if given just one last chance to speak before our death? Maybe that's why we're so drawn to these final words in the first place. They reflect not just the story of the person being executed, but something about us too. Final statements are never the same. Some are calm, some are angry, some are nearly incoherent. But taken together, they form a kind of emotional map, a final trace of the human spirit in the face of death. In this next part, we'll explore the last words of inmates executed in Georgia, grouped not by their crimes, but by their state of mind in those final moments. And we'll begin with those who seem to accept their fate at the very end. Death row inmates who have made peace with their fate, even if they don't welcome it. Scotty Garnell Morrow was executed on May 2nd, 2019 for the 1994 murders of his ex-girlfriend and her friend in Gainesville, Georgia. He never denied the killings, claiming they were acts of passion in the heat of an argument. But prosecutors argued the crime was premeditated. He had arrived armed and ready to kill, they say. While strapped to the gurney, Scotty offered a sincere apology.
I would like to extend my most sincerest and heartfelt apology to the Young family, the Woods family, to Miss LaToya Horn. Sorry for all the injuries and things that I have caused you. Sorry for all the pain and harm that I have caused these 2 families. And I also would like to apologize to my family for the pain and heartache that I have caused them. If you could ever find it in your hearts to forgive, I would ask that you do that, and mostly for yourselves, because holding anger and hatred in your hearts only hinders you. And once you're able to forgive, you're able to move on in life. And once again, I sincerely apologize.
And just a day before his execution, the condemned spoke with a reporter and calmly accepted his fate.
Are you prepared to die?
I don't want to die, but I'm at peace. If God so wills it, that it's going to be done. I don't want to, but if that's what happens, so I hold no ill will in my heart against anyone.
Willie Pye, the most recent person executed in the state of Georgia as of this recording, was put to death on March 2024, marking the end of a 4-year pause in executions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Willie was convicted in the 1993 kidnapping, rape, and murder of his ex-girlfriend Alicia Lynn Yarborough. His case drew controversy due to his documented intellectual disability and with having a low IQ that some argued should have disqualified him from execution under the Supreme Court precedent. But the state of Georgia moved forward with his execution regardless. Willie recorded his final statement just hours before his execution. His words were slow and careful, at times stumbling through some names, which could have been because of nerves, anxiety, or his intellectual disability, but it was still filled with unexpected calm and gratitude.
I just want to be thankful to the entire staff at this prison, Jackson Prison. Everybody treated me very well. I mean, very well. And I ate like a dog on death watch. I slept good. I never shed a tear. I don't remorse for everything that happened, but the staff here made everything that's so easy for me.
For some inmates, their final words aren't about themselves, actually. They're directed outward, toward the families that are left behind, to the families they hurt, the ones who lost the most. In Georgia, many condemned inmates use their last moments to apologize. Some do it through whispered words, others through emotional pleas. And while we can't know if the apologies are actually sincere, the weight of the moment, the irreversible finality, makes these words very hard to ignore. Brandon Astor Jones, executed in 2016 at the age of 72, was one of Georgia's oldest death row inmates. He was convicted of murdering a store clerk during a 1979 robbery. In his final written statement, he said, "To the family of the victim, I regret the pain I caused you. I pray for your healing. I'm sorry for what I did." Andrew Brannon, a Vietnam War veteran executed in 2015 for the murder of a sheriff's deputy during a traffic stop, offered his final words directly to the victim's loved ones. "I am proud to have been able to walk point for my comrades and pray that the same thing does not happen to any of them. I extend my condolences to the Nichole family, especially Kyle's parents and his wife and his 2 children." Both of these men faced the same end, and in their final moments, they both chose to direct their last breath not toward protest, but toward apology. Whether it brought peace to the families or not, they still felt compelled to speak them. And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that last apology is less about redemption and more about being seen, being heard. One final attempt to return a shred of humanity to a life already judged. And they weren't alone. Most men executed on Georgia's death row have chosen to apologize to the victims' families. Some quietly, others through written statements or emotional final words. Among them are Daniel Anthony Lucas, Joshua Bishop, John Washington Hightower, and many more. One of the most heartfelt came from Robert Wayne Holsey, executed in 2014 for the killing of a sheriff's deputy. His final statement was filled with visible remorse and personal responsibility. "I'm sorry for taking your son's life. He didn't deserve to die that night. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I, and I alone, am responsible for your son's death." We won't recount every single story, but the pattern, as you can see, is very clear. For many of the condemned, the last thing they wanted to do was to simply say, "I'm sorry." When death is certain and minutes remain, many turn to the only source of comfort that they have left. Across Georgia's death row, some of the most haunting final moments have been filled with prayer, scripture, and appeals to God. Not always for forgiveness, but for peace. Kelly Gissendaner has been the only woman in Georgia executed by lethal injection and the first woman in the state put to death in 70 years. She was convicted in the 1997 murder of her husband, Doug, a crime carried out by her boyfriend, but one she had helped orchestrate. In her final moments in 2015, Kelly didn't speak to the crowd in anger. She didn't plead. Instead, she actually sang Amazing Grace, a cappella with trembling voice and full conviction.
"I love you, Sam. And I love you, Susan. You let my kids know I went out singing Amazing Grace. And tell the Gissendaner family, I am so sorry. That amazing man lost his life because of me. And if I could take it back, if this would change it, I would have done it a long time ago. But it's not. And I just hope they find peace. And I hope they find some happiness. God bless you.
Her execution sparked national attention, with clergy, advocates, Pope Francis himself, and even former prison officials calling for clemency, pointing to her spiritual transformation while she was incarcerated. But in the end, it wasn't enough. And long before Kelly, Lena Baker became the first and only Black woman to be executed by the state of Georgia. In 1945, she was convicted of killing a white man who had allegedly held her against her will. Lena claimed it was self-defense, but the all-white jury took less than a day to sentence her to death. She was posthumously pardoned 60 years later. But before her execution, she said, "What I done, I did in self-defense. I am ready to meet my God." For William Saley, executed in 2016 for the 1990 murder of his estranged wife's father, God was central to his final moments. His last words included a prayer and an appeal to his children.
Although Georgia may take my life, the Lord will save my soul.
And Roy Blankenship, put to death in 2011, offered a short but striking final prayer. He closed his eyes and said, "God bless you all. I hope to see you in the kingdom." In a sterile room filled with guards, witnesses, and silence, faith often becomes the final companion. For some, it's a way to cope, and for others, it's a final plea for redemption. Whether the words are sung, spoken, or whispered under their breath, the message is the same. As death draws near, many are no longer speaking to the court, or the crowd, or even their victims, but to God. While many on death row admit their guilt, there are some who go to their death still insisting that they didn't commit the crimes for which they were condemned in the first place. Some went quietly, and some went apologizing. But others went to their deaths still claiming they didn't belong there at all. Their final statements don't ask for forgiveness, but demand to be heard. And whether we believe them or not, their last words leave a haunting question behind. What if they were telling the truth all along? Troy Davis is perhaps the most well-known case of this. Executed in 2011 for the 1989 murder of off-duty Savannah police officer Mark McPhail, Troy's conviction was based largely on eyewitness testimony, many of whom later recanted, citing police pressure and inconsistencies. His case drew global attention, with nearly 1 million people from around the world signing petitions urging the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles to grant him clemency. But none of it stopped his execution. In his final statement, Troy Davis turned to the family of the victim and said,
"I'd like to let you all know that despite the situation, I know all of you still are convinced I'm the person that killed your father, your son, and your brother. But I am innocent. The incidents that happened that night was not my fault. I did not have a gun that night. I did not shoot your family member. But I'm so sorry for your loss. I really am, sincerely. All that I can ask is that each of you look deeper into this case so that you really will finally see the truth."
His final words weren't a confession, but a plea to the world. Don't forget me, don't forget what happened here. Jose Martinez High, executed in 2001 for a fatal stabbing, also maintained his innocence to the very end. Just before his death, he said, "I did not kill that little boy, nor did I tell him that he was going to die. That was a lie told by a detective." Like Troy, Jose's case raised serious questions about representation, evidence, and due process. But by the time doubt caught up, the clock had already run out. Larry Eugene Moon, executed in 1986 for a convenience store robbery and murder, was one of the earliest cases in Georgia's modern death penalty era. He too insisted he had been wrongfully convicted. His last words were simple but firm. "I'm innocent, and I did not kill Ricky Callahan." And then there was Marin Wilson Jr., executed in 2019, convicted alongside Robert Butts Jr. in the 1996 murder of Donovan Corey Parks. He spent more than 2 decades insisting he was not the shooter. His final words, "I ain't never took a life in my life." He also turned to his loved ones and said, "I love y'all forever. Death can't stop it. Can't nothing stop it." Then he accepted a final prayer. Moments later, he was gone, his voice cut off, but his claim of innocence still echoing in the silence and in the air. These are the cases that stay with us, not just because of what was said, but because of what might never have been known. When someone dies claiming innocence and the state carries out the execution anyway, we're left to wrestle with the deepest question of all. What if we got it wrong? These final statements are more than just denials. They are declarations, echoes of men facing the ultimate punishment with no confession, no closure. And for the public, they leave behind one haunting question. If we execute someone who says they didn't do it, what if they're right? But not every final statement is filled with sorrow or even redemption. Some go out with fury, similarly to John Wayne Gacy, unapologetic, bitter, or mocking. These are the men who, even as the drugs enter their veins, refuse to submit to the system that had condemned them. For some, it's all about control. The only thing left to them is how they meet death and what they say when it arrives. J.W. Ledford Jr., executed in 2017 for the brutal stabbing of his 73-year-old neighbor, didn't offer forgiveness. He didn't seek it either. Instead, he used his final words to quote Cool Hand Luke, mock the process and lash out. How long do I get to talk? Do I start now? What we have here is a failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach, so that's why we have what we have here today. I am not the failure. You are the failure to communicate. Then he left us with this. You can kiss my white trash ass. I'm just shaking the bush, boss. Let's do it. For him, there was no apology, no sign of remorse. Just a final middle finger to the state and to the people who were watching. It's easy to judge these words, but maybe they tell us something deeper about what the condemned feel in that final hour. Rage, exhaustion, maybe even hopelessness. And for some, silence would be surrender. So instead, they go out shouting and fighting, not with grace, not with regret, but with defiance. And then not every inmate offers a final statement before their execution. In fact, sometimes silence can say more than words ever could. Let's take Ray Cromartie, for example. Executed on November 13th, 2019, Ray was convicted of the 1994 murder of a store clerk during a robbery. But when it came time for his final words, he simply refused. As the clock ticked down to his execution, Ray chose to remain silent. He declined to make a final statement at all, a choice that speaks volumes in its own right. Marcus Ray Johnson, executed in 2015 for the 1994 rape and murder of Angela Sizemore, also refused to make a final statement as well. Sometimes the absence of words can be just as powerful as a defiant shout or a heartfelt apology, leaving us to wonder about the thoughts and emotions of the person who chose to say nothing at the end at all. What might that silence reveal? And what do we, the public, make of it as we watch a man face the end of his life without uttering a single word? When we step back and look at all these final words side by side, a pattern emerges, but not a simple one. Each man or woman faced death in their own way. Some accepted it quietly, taking full responsibility for what they had done. Others looked straight at the victim's family and begged for forgiveness, hoping to offer one last piece of peace. Some went out swinging, defiant, angry, unrepentant. And then there were those who claimed innocence until their final breath, leaving behind a cloud of doubt that still lingers in the air to this day. There were prayers, there were curses, and there was silence. Some statements felt rehearsed, others came out more raw, fragmented, heavy with fear or faith or simply exhaustion. Each one reflects not just the crime, but the person at the center of it, the human behind the headlines, the emotion behind the statistics, the complexity behind the label murderer. And maybe that's why we can't stop listening, because final words aren't really about guilt or innocence at all. They're about something much deeper, what it means to face death and what it means to be human. Final words carry weight. They can be sharp as a blade, soft as a hymn, or hauntingly uncertain. Some beg forgiveness, while some claim innocence. Others spit rage or just sink into silence. But each one, no matter how brief or how blunt, offers a final glimpse into the soul of the condemned, a glimpse into their final moments at the end of their life. Whether whispered through tears, barked in anger, or choked out through trembling breaths, these statements are more than just endings. They are reflections of regret, of defiance, of humanity. We listen to them because we're looking for something, whether it's closure, meaning, maybe even justice. But what do we actually find? Sometimes it's peace, other times discomfort. Sometimes we're left wondering not about the crime itself, but actually about ourselves. Why do we lean in when someone speaks their last words? Is it because we want to understand the mind of a killer? Or because, deep down, we wonder what we would say? Most of us actually won't know the day we die, but they did. They had time to choose words that might outlive them. So maybe that's the real reason why we listen. Not to hear who they were, but to ask who we are. And if you had one final moment, what would you say? Because when the door closes and the needle drops, there's no more time left to speak. The final judgment has been made, but for these Georgia inmates, their legacies are far from over.